the movement to get Juneteenth recognized as a national holiday has been going on for a while. So the senator, Trent Lott, introduced a joint resolution. And when he introduced that joint resolution was Senate Joint Resolution number 11. The title reads, a joint resolution commemorating Juneteenth, Independence Day, June 19th, 1865, the day slavery finally came to an end in the United States. That came from the United States Senate. And keep in mind which senator it came from. Trent Lott was a senator from Mississippi. Now, as far as this 13th Amendment is concerned, Mississippi didn't ratify the 13th Amendment until February 7, 2013. But now let's talk about what, when you were mentioning the amendment, and I need folks to understand this from a civics class. Okay, in order for an amendment, for a proposal to become an amendment, it has to meet two criteria. Number one, 2/3 of the Congress must approve it. So on January 31st, 1865, 2/3 of the Congress approved the proposal. At the time of the Civil War, that it ended, there were 36 states. The other requirement for that proposal to become an amendment is that 3/4 of the states have to ratify it. 3/4 of 36 is 27. On December 6th, 1865, Georgia became the 27th state to ratify the 13th Amendment. Now, I know some of you are thinking to yourself, look, man, we got Juneteenth. Why are you caught up on the technicality? I'm caught up on the technicalities for two reasons.
Yeah.
Because I guarantee you, I'm going to ask you this, Brother Dixon. If somebody were to say to you, do Black Lives Matter or all lives matter, what are you going to say?
I'm going to say Black Lives Matter because we know the context of the conversation. Okay.
Yeah. And so from this standpoint, Black lives didn't just start mattering now that the Black Lives Matter movement happened. Black lives have always mattered. Okay, so keep that in mind. Number two, I do respect the history. And anybody who doesn't respect their history, I will show you a fool. So I do have a respect. Unapologetically, I respect my history. But now let's go back to Black Lives Matter. If we're going to commemorate the end of America's original sin, which is chattel slavery in this country, is anybody trying to convince me that leaving 225,000 Black folks still enslaved, okay? No, if we want to commemorate the end of America's original sin, do it right. See, this ain't like Christmas where people have, scholars have debated and come to the conclusion nobody knows when Jesus was born. Okay? This is not that. Right. Everybody knows there's only 27 amendments in the Constitution. Right. You're trying to tell me that the Vice President of the United States didn't know that? You're trying to tell me that the President of the United States didn't know that?
Or at least some of their aides, there's enough researchers there in Washington, D.C. to facilitate this.
Let's be clear. The United States government, we got access to every word that was ever written, okay? So, and keep this in mind, family. Whenever you see a presidential debate, first thing you do, when they cut to it, everybody's doing fact checking. But when it comes to our history, the vice president, see, I don't believe that the vice president wrote her speech. But for them to come out and make that error, it's just insane to me. But even more so, what troubles me, and again, Brother Dixon, both you and I love Juneteenth. As a matter of fact, we love any day in which our ancestors were freed from the evils of chattel slavery. But if we're going to commemorate the end of America's original sin, how do you leave 250,000 folks out there? Their souls are crying to us, hey, what about us? And all people had to do was make it December 6th. But because this folklore has been going, this big lie has been happening, we got what we got. Juneteenth is a prime example of the danger of not knowing our history, because we have been disrespectful not only to ourselves, to our history, and most importantly, to our ancestors.
Let's start with our ancestors. You gave us context. This is an image that you sent over,
Yeah.
and it's the image of the civil rights of the March on Washington. I want us to take a look at that because it shows 225,000 people marching in, and I want people to see exactly what 250,000, quarter of a million people looks
Right,
like.
right. And
We
so,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, you
No,
got it.
and so most of us remember, and if by chance you weren't alive in 1963 and you saw the March on Washington, that's an iconic photo that many of us have seen. That photo was taken from the steps of the Capitol looking out at the Washington Monument. People stretched out. For those of you who are a little bit younger, try and go back and remember the inauguration of the first African American president, Barack Obama. It was a similar look. That's what a quarter of a million people look like. And all
And
I'm
that,
saying
we
that
can't forget them.
if we want to say that Black Lives Matter, and in the spirit of Sister Harriet Tubman, the sister escaped from slavery, but she went back, and she went back, and she went back, and she went back. And people asked her, Sister, why would you keep doing that? You're
Mm,
free.
mm.
She said, eyes ain't free until all's my peoples is free.
That's it. That's
See,
it.
so if we going to commemorate the end of the original sin in America, and we know historically when that happened, December 6th, how do we do
Mhm.
that and leave a quarter of a million people out? Again, we got nothing nothing against Juneteenth, but I got
Right, right.
everything about leaving those souls out there.
Well, let me jump in there because I want to bring up some of the you brought receipts. You have plenty of receipts here.
Sure, sure.
I want to go back to the resolution from 2005 where Kentucky, as the state of Kentucky was getting
Yeah,
ready to designate and recognize
yeah,
Juneteenth National Freedom Day.
right,
They made sure that they got the record straight because those 225,000 Kentuckians that were still being held as slaves, that happened in Kentucky. So
correct.
Kentucky was not going to recognize Juneteenth without putting it correct on the record. Let's bring that up on the screen. The designation, the Juneteenth National Freedom Day,
Right, right.
and I want to read that, or you could read that for them, where they outline the end of the Civil War. Ended in 1865, April 1865. And this is the key sentence right here that you really are pointing out. You said,
Yeah,
but bondage did not end for approximately 225 Kentucky slaves until the 13th Amendment was ratified December 18th, 1865, is how they have it documented here. This was signed June 20th, 2005. So as the state of Kentucky began to recognize Juneteenth as the end of slavery for those Texans who received General Order 3, they
yes.
made sure that they had on the record to honor the 225 Kentuckians who were enslaved until 1865.
They did tell you the truth. And if you go in that same legislation from the state of Kentucky, you go to two whereases down, they say this, whereas they say this. Whereas Juneteenth or June 19th, 1865 is considered the date when the last slaves in America were free. So they're telling you, they told you up above, keep in
Mm,
mind, after Juneteenth, there were 225,000 black folks in Kentucky still enslaved, and they didn't get freedom until the passage of the 13th Amendment. Now, in there, they said ratified on December 18th, 1865. It
right.
was actually December 6th. So all you got to do is look up when was the 13th Amendment ratified. You'll see that Georgia did it on December 6th, 1865. So again, family, the problem here is because we didn't, and so I don't want to believe that any of us in this climate today don't believe that Black Lives Matter. And based on the nefarious system of chattel slavery, none of us would be okay with leaving fam behind. None of us would be. I'm
Mm,
convinced of that.
mm,
So to see the vice president, to see all these people stand up there and say, we gonna do this, and then the vice president, even in her statement, and you got to understand what she said in her statement. She said this: And still, let us remember that the day was not the end of slavery in America. The truth is, it would be 6 months before the 13th Amendment was ratified, before enslaved people in the South and the North were free. So she's telling you, yes, we're going to do this, even though we know there were still folks enslaved. So, family, I'm going to just tell you this. I've always said there is a fundamental difference between ignorance and stupid. We're all ignorant about something, and ignorance simply means you don't know.
Right.
The difference between ignorant and stupid is that you know better and you still do wrong.
You still don't do better.
So am I saying that the Vice President of the United States was stupid? Yeah. If she says we did what we did, yeah, Sister Harris, I love you. I swear, I voted for you. I put you in my calendar. I'm proud of you. But on that,
you do. Matter of fact, you do. You have her in your calendar behind you. Your 365 days of Black history. Yeah. But to that point, I want to flip it a little bit, because I saw that video that you mentioned, and you have the transcript of the speech from Kamala Harris, and she got it wrong, and it sounds like in between the time she got it wrong and either later on that day or very closely after, she's made another announcement where she corrected it. She didn't correct it completely, but she did correct it and let it be known that this was not the end of slavery. So we have two. And the only reason I want to make that distinction is because of your work and people like you who have been pounding the pavement to ensure that the accurate history about Juneteenth has gotten out. So when it came time for Joe Biden to actually sign the law, the bill into law, and you and I both look at the document that he signed, his document did not contain the errors that we're speaking of. Is that correct, or did you see something different?
Okay, so again, if you look at the Senate joint resolution that Thad Cochran introduced, and keep in mind, in 1997, Thad Cochran of Mississippi introduced it to the Senate. J.C. Watts introduced it in the House. And as I stated, the bill states, and again, we're talking about Senate Joint Resolution number 11, a joint resolution commemorating Juneteenth, Independence Day, June 19, 1865, quote, the day on which slavery finally came to an end in the United States. Now, all I can tell you is that now when you look at the text of the bill that was passed by the Senate, now they've taken all that language out. And now what they say is those enslaved in Galveston, and I'm not quoting them, but they say those enslaved in Galveston were the last slaves in the southwestern part of the United States, right? Not even in the South, just in the southwestern part.
Let me jump in there, because we actually have that graphic, and I want to make sure, because again, I didn't know this history. And I appreciate you making that distinction, because just because we're ignorant of the history doesn't make us stupid, but we're just ignorant, uninformed. And you've been bringing that information to us, so I want to bring that on the screen. I want to start first with the Senate resolution that you just read, Senate Resolution 11, which is entitled "A Joint Resolution Commemorating Juneteenth, Independence Day, June 19th, 1865, the day on which slavery finally came to an end in the United States." Put that on the screen for me if you guys have it handy. And this was passed April 10th, 1997. This is where it got entered into the national record incorrectly. And it is taken, and there it is on your screen now. This was passed in the Senate of April 10th, 1997. And it was incorrect on the national record all the way up until this week. This week, as they were talking about this legislation, it was getting ready to be entered into the national record, signed into law by the president with incorrect information. But as people like you and other historians started establishing the record correctly, word got around, and then they made this correction. I want to bring up the next one that you just mentioned, which was the resolution from the Senate that eventually became law. And this is the distinction that they made. Whereas news of the end of slavery did not reach the frontier areas of the United states,
There you
in
go.
particular the state of Texas and
Right.
other southwestern states, until months after the conclusion of the Civil War, more than 2.5 years. They go on and on after years of
Right.
the President Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. Whereas Juneteenth, Independence Day, began as a holiday in the state of Texas and now celebrated in 48 states. I want to skip down a little bit. Whereas
No, no,
slavery,
no, no. Yeah.
you want me to finish? Oh no, that is important. That's an important line
Yes.
there. Whereas Juneteenth, Independence Day, began as a holiday in the state of Texas and is now celebrated in 48 states and the District of Columbia as a special day of observance in recognition of the emancipation of all slaves in the United States. So they
Wrong.
got it right in the first paragraph,
Right.
they got it wrong in the second paragraph.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
because it wasn't the freedom for all slaves. Again, family, I need you to understand this. Go look at the Emancipation Proclamation, read the text. And again, it's saying three things to you. He's declaring all of our ancestors in rebellion against the South free. But he's telling you that those of our ancestors still in those four border states, Maryland, Missouri, Kentucky, and Delaware, slavery is still legal. And again, when West Virginia became a state, slavery was still legal. Now, three of those got rid of slavery. And the state that Mitch McConnell is from, Kentucky, and the state that the president is from, Delaware, those two states never abolished. As a matter of fact, they didn't sign the 13th Amendment. Delaware signed the 13th Amendment in 1901. Kentucky signed the 13th Amendment in 1976. But in those two states, slavery was still well and good. Now, one of the things that I talked to you about, Brother Dixon, is this: to show you the ramifications of having this in the record. In the state of Washington, I lived in the state of Washington for 18 years. I was an engineer in Seattle.
Yeah.
In December of 2020, there's a Black representative named Melanie Morgan who introduced legislation to make Juneteenth a statewide holiday. In the federal legislation, in the federal document, you heard them say 47 states. Washington became the 47th state due to Sister Morgan. If you look at the language in the House Bill 1016 for the state of Washington, it says, as best I can remember, the legislature intends to designate June 19th as a statewide holiday to celebrate the end of chattel slavery in America.
Yeah. Let me jump in there only because we only have a few minutes left here. Sure. That was the Washington House Bill 1016 that you're mentioning. Yes. And that was signed into law May 2021. And it just shows you an example of how misinformation and disinformation in Washington, D.C. matriculated out all the way across this nation and became a part of law.